Welcome back to Sonic Adventure. In this part, we're starting off in the character select screen because there's a few things that I want to show off. First off, there's Sonic's model. As you might have seen, it's updated along with Sonic's upgrades. His shoes are the Lightspeed shoes, and he's wearing the Crystal Ring bracelet. There's also a percentage at the bottom right of the screen showing pretty much how far into the character's campaign that you've gotten. It was at 45, so we're pretty much halfway through. And the second thing that I wanted to show was this summary here. Pretty much just highlights what the last thing you did was. In this case, it was us flying after Eggman in the tornado. But we utterly failed and crashed and were separated from Tails. The third thing pertains to this character, kind of. This is Amy Rose, and as you can hear, her theme song is playing in the background, My Sweet Passion. You don't really hear Sonic's theme, at least not until a lot later in the game. It was playing just there during the summary bit. It's called It Doesn't Matter, and it's probably one of my favorite themes in this game, at least when it comes to character themes. I guess the reason that they don't really play it is because you don't meet Sonic as a playable character, you start off playing as him, and usually when you meet a character, that's when their theme song plays. Like, we just met Amy and it played My Sweet Passion. When we met Tails, it played I Wanna Fly High, etc. Something I want to talk about for a little bit before we get into the next action stage is that the hub world, at least right after crashing with Tails, is kind of vague. Sonic in the last part, and also the summary bit, basically says, I'm worried about Tails, I better try and find him. Thing is, in order to progress with the story, you have to go to the casino area and find Amy instead. The game will tell you, if you talk to the red fairy thing, that basically you gotta go to the casino in order to progress with the story. It's just, I don't like that the story itself doesn't tell you that. It's just a weird, nitpick, I suppose, that I have with the game. Now we're getting into Twinkle Park, which is probably one of my favorite stages in this game, at least when it comes to Sonic. Well, no, I'll say that in a lot of characters' campaigns, Twinkle Park is probably my favorite stage. It starts off with this really cool bumper cart section, where you really get a sense of speed, except for when you have to turn. Basically, the bumper cart can get hit by other things and thus be bumped away, like these monkeys here. If you're not going fast enough, you won't crash through them. You'll basically bounce back and lose all your rings. There's also other bumper carts that you might hit, and doing turns is not that great, at least with Sonic. I think all of the carts have different stats depending on what character you are, and also depending on how many rings you have. The higher the amount of rings, the higher the top speed, I believe. And then with Sonic, I think his turning is pretty bad, and his acceleration isn't all that either. But his top speed is the highest out of all the characters, if I remember correctly. And I probably don't, because I don't really recall what the other characters' stats are either. But you don't really play as the other characters in the story, at least in the bumper cart section. There's a mini game that you can play if you decide to go back to Twinkle Park. It's a few laps in the bumper cart and you get an emblem out of it. I don't do it, at least I didn't do it in the HD version, because I'm not going for all the emblems, I'm just going through the story. And now we've reached the second half of Twinkle Park. At least it should be half, but I take a lot less time than I should actually. The reason being, I've gotten into this mentality of doing the A rank mission, which for Sonic is do everything in a short amount of time. This one being 3 minutes, and you spend about a minute and a half going through the bumper cart section, so it doesn't leave you with a lot of time to do the rest. But for some reason I still find myself compelled to go straight through the lane when it comes to those bowling sections. If you hit the middle pins, you'll get a bunch of rings that fall down from those crown things, but I'm not going to stick around to collect them because I gotta get to the end of the stage. The way I do it is I start a spin dash right here, and I use this ramp to jump super high. If you don't do that, you're gonna have to fall down and do platforming, which is, I'm not saying that it's bad, it's just, it's a bit time consuming, and I kind of want to get the stage over with in 3 minutes. At least, that's what I feel like I should be doing, even though when it comes to the main campaign, you can't get the A rank missions, on your first try. You have to do the C rank first, and then the B rank, and then the A rank. Kinda sucks. I wish they gave you all the emblems if you did all 3 at once or something like that, but, you know, it's no big deal. I like the levels, so I'd be willing to replay them in order to get the emblems. Minigames, not so much. Now we have to get to the next stage in a very odd way. After beating Twinkle Park, this random card falls from the sky, and its use isn't exactly, you know, they don't really tell you. You have to take this employee ID card to this computer here, and it'll open up this shutter, allowing you to get into the next level. The next level being probably one of a lot of people's favorites in this game. It's Speed Highway, and the reason I say that it's a lot of people's favorites is because it was included in Sonic Generations. I believe the way that Sonic Generations handled its stages is because it was an anniversary title and thus a love letter to the Sonic fans. They kind of made a poll so that you can choose what stages go in the games. And for the HD version, so basically PS3 and Xbox 360, they decided to have Speed Highway as the representative for Sonic Adventure. I didn't talk about this before, but in the 3DS version, they used Emerald Coast, which isn't a bad stage pick, but that game is riddled with first stages, you know. I'll just stop about that right now because we're playing Sonic Adventure, not Sonic Generations. And especially not Sonic Generations 3D, even though it's not a bad game, and I'm going to stop talking about it right now because we are riding on a helicopter, which is pretty neat. You have to hang on at the bottom. If you jump preemptively, or if you touch the blades at all, really, you'll get hurt. That's what the fairy tells you, but I kind of skipped her. If you fall down precisely here, you'll be able to land on this platform and skip a bunch of the stage by homing attacking on these badniks here. And if you make it to the last platform, you'll get a 1-up. You shouldn't try to homing attack as you fall. Like, basically, let your homing attack loose right after you bounce off of the last enemy. If you don't, you won't be able to make it to the platform. Like, your homing attack doesn't have enough range to actually hit the 1-up box, so you'll end up just falling. Which isn't too bad, because where you're falling to is actually where you're supposed to go in order to get to this running down the building section, which is pretty much featured in every Sonic Adventure commercial. At least the ones I've seen, that's where it's featured. Now we're in the sort of Act 3, I suppose, of the stage. Act 1 being the nighttime floating highway thing. Act 2 being the running down the building, and this is Act 3. At the beginning of it, there's some evil police cars. If you hold forward during that section, you're basically going to get hit. So either don't hold forward or hold forward and to the right or left. It's kind of a douchey move, and if you're trying to get the level B mission, which is collect a lot of rings and get to the end of the stage and you get hit there, you're probably not going to beat it. At least beat the B mission. That fountain there, if you jump into it while it's low, it's not going to shoot you very high. If you jump into it while it's high, you'll basically get a ton of height and be able to get to the end of the stage. Oddly, we're not getting emeralds for the end of the stage. We're jumping on the canisters, I suppose they could be called, that house a lot of animals. And oddly enough, the canisters do have animals in them that you can collect. The animals are used in the Chow Garden. Basically, if you give one to a Chow, it'll raise its stats in certain ways. Like, if you give it, I guess, a bird, it'll be able to fly better, things like that. I don't really frequent the Chow Garden in this game, so I don't use the animals. I just kind of keep going through the main campaign. I sort of get lost here because, well, the fairy doesn't really help. It basically says, why don't you just wander throughout the city and figure things out on your own? Which I'm fine with. I guess I didn't really say that. It's weird, but I'm fine with it. I just think it's kind of a barrier to entry, I suppose, for other players. And I'm saying that in the fourth part, which is kind of weird, but I feel like most players will be playing as Sonic and they wouldn't want to play as other characters if they can't figure out what's going on as Sonic, you know? It's just, humans are fickle like that. But after going back to the casino, we figure out that that robot is taking Amy to the Mystic Ruins, so we have to chase after her. And oddly, Amy's back in the Dreamcast model when she's being carried by the robot. At least, I think that's her Dreamcast model. I'm pretty sure it is. Something that I forgot to talk about in the whatchamacallit, Speed Highway. That's what it was. The design of the stage. I should have talked about it then, but I'll talk about it now. It's pretty fast-paced, and there's a lot of multiple pathways that you can go through. The last act, especially, being very open-ended. You could go to a lot of different places and get to the end of the stage a lot of different ways, which I think is really good for a Sonic game. It adds replay value. You'll pretty much be like, maybe, when I'm going through the stage, I'll take this path instead of this path. And I'll get there either faster or slower, depending on what path I took. And eventually you'll be able to create the perfect path that'll allow you to get to the end in under the A rank time. And I like that. It makes me want to play the game more, pretty much. We lost Amy and that mysterious robot, so we basically have to chase after the egg carrier. There was a door all the way at the end here, after the, well, Sonic kind of freaking out there, at the end of the path where the ice cap was. And there's another power-up for us to get here. It's not that great of a power-up. It's useful in certain situations, and you do need it to get to the end of the game, but honestly I don't find myself using it very much. Sonic's power-ups are pretty situational, honestly. I think a lot of them are. They're not really all that great in this game. Right here, I'm going to show off something that is pretty cool. There's a bridge here. A very weird bridge that honestly shouldn't be standing right now. But if you head to this altar over here, you get to see a big jewel. That is the Master Emerald, and we'll be involving ourselves with that later. Right now, though, we're going to continue on. The next stage, we need to get to it with the ancient light. And it was explained to us, you charge up like the light speed dash, except you do it near an enemy instead, and it'll basically destroy it. We'll get into the next stage in the next part.